Welcome, people of planet Earth and all planets beyond. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Josh, and today we're going to talk about what these three symbols can tell you about how to date your vintage clothing. Let's get into it. So these symbols are trade symbols. They are used by commodities, industries to communicate to the consumer what it is they're buying. They often do like certifications that these are certified quality, certain levels of quality. And symbols like these three that we're going to talk about and many others are used for all kinds of products all throughout the market. These three are likely the most important vintage trade symbols that we have really seen used a lot in America specifically, but also some of these around the world. So let's get started with the first symbol that we're going to look at, and that is the Woolmark. Created in 1964 by the International Wool Secretariat, which started as sort of an Australian wool industry organization and began to blossom and sort of cover the entire world and the wool production. They created this symbol primarily because there was growing and increased usage of polyester, nylon, and acrylic, these sort of space-age materials that started replacing wool in a lot of garments that would traditionally be made with wool, like sweaters and cardigans, etc. You've probably seen a lot of these 80s and 70s sweaters were made of acrylic, very common. And since wool was losing market share, they thought they needed to sort of create something that would help the consumer recognize the higher quality of wool. And the Woolmark was invented and created, and early adopters included brands like Pendleton, and can be found from even on the garments, like in the case of Pendleton, which you can find a lot of these Woolmarks on the tags or on the marketing materials or advertisements that you see in magazines or on the tags that were on the dead stock pieces of clothing. So if your garment has the Woolmark logo on it, you can be certain that it's not older than 1964. This is really helpful with like Pendleton jackets that have the symbol and those that do not. Because the tags used on both sides of 1964 often look very, very similar. And so the absence of one or the presence of one can determine whether or not it falls on the 1964's younger side or the older side. Now, of course, this really only gives you that range. It's not going to tell you exactly when your garment was produced, but it's one of the tools among many other tools that you can use to help give a more clearer picture of when your garment was made. I had this problem come up just recently where I mislisted a Pendleton jacket as being like the 50s, when in reality it was the 60s or later. I just didn't pay attention to the Woolmark that was on the garment, as you can see here, and if I had, I would have definitely been much more clear in the listing. I did correct it ultimately, but it really is helpful to remember that that Woolmark does give you an outer limit of how old it could even possibly be. The next trade symbol we're going to look at is the seal of cotton. Now, the seal of cotton was created in 1973. Interestingly enough, it was created by the same agency that created the back patch for Levi's and the Coca-Cola logo, interestingly enough. Much like the Woolmark, the seal of cotton was implemented and created by cotton producers and cotton industry because of the creep of synthetic materials into clothing. And they wanted to make sure that the cotton industry remained robust and competitive, and that consumers could tell the difference between something that was made with cotton and those that were not made with cotton. Now, they made a couple of different seals, but specifically the seal of cotton is something that is 100% cotton. They have a couple other sort of sub-seals that indicate items that are like a cotton blend, like 60-40 is called their natural blend, and they will have that in its own very similar marker with a word under it. But this is helpful because in the 60s, about 80% of clothing was made with cotton, or primarily from cotton, if not 100% cotton. But by 1975, that had shrunk all the way down to nearly 30% of the market was 100% cotton or even made with cotton blends. So this was an important distinction that the cotton industry wanted to make, and it really did help. By the end of 1975, about 18% of consumers could recognize it, and today it is nearly 80% of consumers recognize the seal of cotton. So because this symbol was created in 1973, while it doesn't give us a specific date for our particular garment, we do know that we can use it to determine that our garment is no older than 1973. And this can be pretty helpful, especially in conjunction with other methods that you might be using. Early adopters included brands like Wrangler and Hanes, and I believe Fruit of the Loom was in there. So a lot of times they would put the seal of cotton right on the packaging material or such like that. In some cases they put it right on the care tags, as you can see here on this particular garment. Now with this particular garment, I'm pretty confident it's not from the 70s at all, probably from the 90s. But if there were some other markers that maybe made me think of the 70s or the 60s, just seeing this seal would let me know that it was certainly no older than 1973. Alright, so the last trade symbol we're going to take a look at is the Crafted with Pride in the USA symbol, which was created in 1984 by an organization of the same name. The whole point of this symbol was to help consumers recognize products that were produced in America. In the 80s, a lot of textile mills were beginning to close down. Of course, this would accelerate after the passing of NAFTA in 1993 and 94, and textile mills across the country were closing down. Hundreds of thousands of jobs were being lost, and so this organization wanted to promote the purchasing by consumers of products from America made by Americans. So like the other three symbols, this symbol is still in common use today, though certainly there is not nearly as many products as were in the 80s that were made in America, so the numbers are few and far between. So early adopters of this symbol were brands like Carhartt and Wrangler. Wrangler is like, hey, you got a symbol? Let me slap it on my stuff. And so they slapped it on everything. They loved their symbols. But what's interesting is that this was really helpful to me recently when I was trying to date a pair of Wrangler jeans. And I'll show you what happened. I was looking at a picture with the dead stock tags from the store. And these were interesting because they included the Crafted with Pride in the USA symbol, but were also made by Bluebell. Bluebell was Wrangler's parent company, and they sold the business to VF, the VF brand, in 1986. So, using the fact that the Crafted with Pride in USA symbol was produced in 1984 and Bluebell no longer existed in the same manner in 1986, gave me a window of 1984 to 1986 for the production of this pair. Most likely really just 84 and 85. 85 is the most likely, since that would have been the prime time that after the release of the symbol and right before Bluebell got sold. So this is already for me has been really helpful to be aware of the age of this particular symbol, because it can really help you narrow down certain things within certain smaller parameters using other methodologies. So if your garment has Crafted with Pride in the USA, doesn't mean that it is vintage per se, but it does mean it's no older than 1984, and you can use other methods to really help narrow it down from there. So by no means are these all the trade symbols that are out there, but these are probably the top 3 most common that you would see on vintage clothing. So I hope this was helpful, hope this was informative. Hopefully you can use some of these methods in the future. If you want to find out about more methods that you can use to date your vintage clothing, check the eye above for a playlist of dozens of videos on a bunch of different brands and different topics. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.